folks. Welcome to another episode of Film Study. This is Ken McKusick, and we're here to have our weekly dose of Friday morning GM. And I'm joined, as always, by co-host Voss Laricos. Voss, how you doing?
Pretty well, Ken. Always great to join you here for Friday morning GM. Exciting times for the Baltimore Ravens. We unfortunately wrapped up last episode about 15 minutes before the Jesse Minter hire was announced. So tough timing on that one. But I just off the top, I am more than happy with Jesse Minter. He would have been my second candidate after Kubiak, and only because you prefer offense versus defense when you can. But I think he does a nice job of bridging the DNA that you want to keep from the Harbaugh era with also hopefully some modernization, some improvement upon some of the Ravens way philosophy.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly what it did. He spoke to exactly that today. Not that at a press conference like this, you can gather a lot of depth into what's going to occur. I think there's a lot of coach speaking, meaning like that. We'll get into that over the next few minutes. But he said some things that I thought were common threads that I really believe are going to be a big deal. And one of the big ones was collaboration with the players. I see him as much more of a consensus builder than someone who, is a dictatorial play installer kind of thing. And I'm not even saying that Monken or were that, but I'm just saying that they, Minter will be different, I believe, in this regard, and that he really talked very significantly about connections, such that if there really are problems with the players going forward in terms of truly connecting with the players, I think that would be a pretty big red flag right away.
Yeah, he said all the right things. I mean, it was somewhat reminiscent of a John Harbaugh press conference, a certain bit of coach speak, but certainly some honesty and some, warm feelings towards the fan base. I thought in particular, the video that the Ravens PR team put out last night when he first arrived at the castle with his family, and he said, this is about us and trying to build, a sense of community among the entire organization was spot on. I like what I see. As we talked about in previous episodes, the fact that he is a high-end play caller, one of the better minds, is beneficial. There's 10 teams right now all competing for assistants. It's a fierce competition. So if you can have one side of the ball locked down, it beats the alternative of a CEO coach who doesn't necessarily have a high-end play caller on either side of the ball at the moment.
It's a distinction from a CEO head coach. And most of the time I'd say I probably am now very slightly on the side of you want to have a play caller on one side of the ball, but I'm not entirely convinced that the CEO methodology doesn't have significant merits. And with the right guy, it might have been the right call. Minter in this case, too good to pass up.
Vrabel's a good example of a CEO. I mean, he's not a full CEO, but his in-game management is excellent, and that's where he brings value.
Okay. All right, let's talk a little bit about the press conference itself. The Ravens are going to stay with the side-by-side reporting structure, so the silos will be the same as they have been for the entire Bisciotti era. I think they were that way during the Modell era as well.
That's what I was going to ask you, because Eric made mention they've won 2 Super Bowls this way. And as we know, Art Modell hired Billick before, or maybe the same year when Steve became minority partner. But I was interested to hear that, and I wanted to know if you recalled if Billick had his own direct line to Modell, or if he was underneath of Ozzie to begin until Bisciotti became majority owner.
No, I don't think he was ever underneath Ozzie. Ozzie is the one who got promoted in the early years in Baltimore. If you remember, he was not even called the general manager in those early years, even though he was effectively the general manager. But he got promoted into that role. Anyway, I'm very happy with the structure staying the same. It has been a very successful structure. I want that to be the same, and I think that it creates the way that Bisciotti has talked about it. Says, anytime you need me, I'm the tie-breaking vote. Creates a high degree of incentive for those two guys to work it out. So they'll be that. I think the Ravens have now a very strong group of consensus builders. There can be times when that slows down a process. Maybe there are times where it's not the absolute ideal in terms of minimizing the time you prepare for the draft. But in terms of actually drafting on that day, it usually is a good thing, unless you have unless your general manager is subjugating his own beliefs to do
Mm-hmm.
so, and in which case I'm not sure it would always be good.
I
I'll
think
give you a
that's
perfect example, by the way.
yeah,
I
yeah,
want to
yeah.
toss this out there that
Ben
it
Mason.
no, I'm not. I'm not going with Ben Mason. I'm not going with any of the fifth round pick or the low rigs. I'm going to go straight to last year's number one, Malachi Starks.
Mhm.
Enormously consensus pick across a broad group of the population, the NFL, reviewers and whatnot. It looks right now like Emanwari would have been the better choice. Okay.
Yep.
It does not, that does no guarantees. Their careers may take different paths. Emanwari may, get busted for something or any number of things could happen that would ruin his career. Could get hurt. Probably the most likely. But as of right now, it looks like that was it. And I would have liked it if DaCosta, obviously in this case,
Mhm.
was in favor of Emanwari for him to overrule even 8 or 9 scouts underneath him who are saying, no, that's not the way to see it.
Yeah, actually, our friend Garnett put up the clip from the draft room from Ravens Wired this last week, and DaCosta called 2 of the scouts over and said, if it's between this guy and this guy, who do you prefer? And they both pointed to Starks, and the reason why they pointed to Starks was intangibles, not for on-field necessarily talent. So, anyway, trying to wrap it all together, there's both DaCosta and Minter both made mention of partnership, and I think that's very clear that that's the way the Ravens have done things going all the way back. And now you see that the negotiations that transpired with the Giants, that's the type of situation that Harbaugh wanted as well. So I'm interested to see if there's a little bit. It's natural, right, to have a little bit of different opinion when you change coaches. Ozzie, was acted and a little bit differently under Billick, I'd say, than Harbaugh. And now we saw how DaCosta performed under Harbaugh, and maybe now with Minter, he brings hopefully a little bit better out of him, but it's not a guarantee.
So they're very different people, by the way. And Billick and Harbaugh particularly early on in his career, and Billick pretty much for the whole time, incredibly fiery. Harbaugh would get very upset with players, particularly early on. He'd be into Ozzie's office and he would say certain things about players, and and then Ozzie is probably the calmest person that's ever stepped foot in that building, and he would be able to just basically listen and listen and listen and say, John, we spent a second round
Right.
draft pick just this
Right.
year on this player. we can't get rid of him just yet. So,
Right.
Um,
Well, back to the thread. I think that's good that they're keeping the silos. I think that's the best structure to have. But we'll see. I assume that there's going to be some 10%, 20% modifications to the Ravens way philosophy because you now have another equal partner at the head of the organizational chart, and he might want to do things a little bit differently and
who's
modernizing things.
Who's another one they're adding? A different
Minter.
partner? You're just saying Minter?
Yeah, okay. Minter's a different partner. So Harbaugh has a few certain things that he really looks for,
Gotcha.
And Minter may not look for the exact same thing. So you're brewing up a pot of chili or the stew or the soup, and you have maybe there's some different ingredients now. So that's possibly a reason for excitement.
Well, I mean, yeah, anytime they are very careful in looking over everything that's been done before and said, very thoughtfully, numbers 2, 17, and 31, we can do better by doing A, B, and C. And they vet that a little bit and they move forward. That's fantastic. Okay. Yeah. And I think as an organization, they will understand that there are risks and changes to any of those things.
Mm-hmm.
It really sounds like Minter is very much, they want to get to running the football. They want to be very effective doing that. And I think that is really the path for the Ravens during Lamar Jackson, even as Lamar's legs start to go over the next 5 years or so, it's going to still be a time where they're going to want to be depending on them significantly as a misdirection component for the offense. It doesn't mean you might depend on them differently as a misdirection component of the offense by running more under center play action, for example. But I think they're still going to want to do that. And I like the fact that Minter really seems to understand what the Ravens way is and it means. And he plucked out the very biggest item there, which is the teams needs to be at our best when the best is needed, which
Yes.
basically is directly hitting on not the lack of success in the playoffs.
Well, I mean, I think Harbaugh could say the same. It's not disqualifying that John couldn't claim that. I mean, everybody wants to be their best, but yeah, it was a good it was a good quote for sure. It was a good quote. Just to put a button on the potential for change. I do think we need to be careful to bring our preconceived notions from the previous time. It was such a long time that those are kind of baked in, but specific players that the previous coaching staff didn't have great affinity for may now become players that the new coaching staff can develop into something special. I'd point to a guy like Trenton Simpson as somebody that may fit that mold, where the Harbaugh staff didn't quite, like him, and Minter may be really able to unlock the best that he has to offer. So
Yeah, it could
we'll
be
see how that
Starks
plays
too.
out.
Mike Green.
Yeah, Starks.
Yeah.
I mean, all the guys, but some of the guys where they were drafted high and didn't quite make the cut, and we said, well, let's trust the coach's judgment here. Well, now you have new coaches, so let's see what their judgment is.
Okay. All right. What else was there to say? Some interesting stuff from Eric DaCosta and Sashi Brown about the process. They said it was a 2-week sprint to hire him. There was no mention of the Raiders' interest being a turning point in this. But what he did said was there's a lot about technology. He said, they didn't have Zoom when they hired John Harbaugh 18 years ago, but they do now. Zoom getting a lot of free advertisement today, by the way. And they had all sorts of people involved in the interviews on their side. They were able to cast a much wider net in terms of who they looked at. So it was very impressive insight into the process. Once again, I wish they would give us a booklet that tells us exactly how this went down. But we've heard pieces of it certainly today.
Yeah, I definitely would like more insight. It does seem like they were. I mean, we sat here last week and said trust the process, go through all 5 interviews in person. Doesn't look like they necessarily did that. That's okay. I mean, that's okay. It seems like Minter was their guy that they earmarked maybe even before they let in the last quarter of the regular season. He wanted to come here, and DaCosta said that he knocked it out of the park in person. What was the exact? He blew him away. Was the exact terminology he used. But one more small note, but I did think it was telling that Eric made mention that Steve tasked him to find the next legacy coach, which wasn't necessarily clear from the Bisciotti press conference, where he was saying, we'll give him 5 years, 6 years, and then if he doesn't win the Super Bowl, he's out of here. And they viewed Minter as the best legacy coach. And, we'll see what happens with Kubiak. Maybe he does turn into better results, better coach. But if he didn't inspire the Ravens to wait for him, then I trust the Ravens' judgment there.
Yeah, I think that's a fair way to put it. And it didn't come up specifically. The hook was baited, but they didn't bite on this one. Was the Raiders' interest something that caused the Ravens to move early on Minter as opposed to letting the process play out all the way through? But I think it was very clear from Minter. A lot of the corroborating things he said, the pieces fit together in terms of Harbaugh being the biggest influences in his coaching life and this and that. And, the collaborative nature, the teamwork of wanting to be, obviously, I take this in part to mean having a GM at the same level as opposed to a level above, a whole bunch of stuff like that. I think all the pieces fit together, that when he says this was the job he wanted, it certainly should have been anyway, but it probably was based on his knowledge of the organization and knowledge of the structure.
I think that he was probably the front runner by far when we spoke last week, and there was maybe some outside pressures, and they were going to give the other guys, the other potential candidates, an interview to see if they could knock him off the perch. And they said, let's just get this done. And let's not play this game. And now we're 2 weeks behind in the coordinator search because, as I mentioned, I mean, there's a lot going on right now. It's almost like when the draft ends and it's UDFAs and hurry up and get your UDFAs. That's kind of the scramble for position coaches at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And they mentioned that the players, by the way, some of them are involved still in the coordinator search, which I thought was very interesting. So I don't know how large that group is. It's a small group of players involved. It could literally be Jackson and Hamilton.
Yep.
or Jackson and Roquan, or it could be, really don't know. But anyway,
You said a
representation on
small
both
group.
sides of the ball.
Exactly what I was going to say. One more takeaway. Well, this is probably the biggest takeaway, and we already mentioned it, but Jesse Minter does plan to call the defense. And I thought it was interesting. He said he has processes in place to help so that he can both manage the game and call a defense at the same time. So I'm not exactly sure what those are. You could probably look back at the NFC Championship game and say that calling plays hurt Sean McVay. And he did not manage the game perfectly. But I was at least glad to hear that Minter is prioritizing both facets.
Okay, so let me just say this. I think when you're on defense, the decisions that you can make in terms of game management are much simpler in terms of, you make a timeout, you don't make a timeout, somebody's in your ear to do this. On offense, you have first of all, defense, you're reacting. And you're deciding how much risk to take. Offense, you're acting, you have the football, and you have enormous game management onus upon you in terms of run or pass to bleed clock, et cetera, et cetera. So the defense doesn't have that level of control over it. They only have a few things they can do strategically to change that, like you see at the end of a half sometimes where they have outside linebackers guarding the
good point. Very good point. I mean, Kyle Van Noy made one of the, and Kyle Van Noy is on a media blitz at the moment. I think this was since we last recorded, but he said the younger generation prefers the X's and O's types of guys. They don't like the rah-rah type necessarily quite so much. And Minter's quite a bit younger than some of the coaches. So I think he's going to have a good connection with the players. But I was kind of surprised to hear Van Noy, because Van Noy seems like a culture-oriented guy. But he said that the younger guys, they want the X's and O's, and they can get themselves, they can motivate themselves maybe.
Well, he may. I mean, first of all, I kind of think Kyle Van Noy might be above motivation of this type, like a motivational speech from Roquan Smith. I see him as being, he's a very cerebral guy for starters,
Sure.
and I don't see it as likely. Joe Flacco, moderately cerebral, but he would point to Ray Lewis. He goes, half the time I don't understand what he's saying.
Exactly.
All right. So, it connects with people. Anyway, it's good to have leaders of a few different types on the team like that. I think Kyle Hamilton will be an intellectual leader for most of his career. And my guess is that Roquan Smith, as long as he is here, will be a emotional leader.
Yeah, I think it's good to have variety across the 53-man roster, personality. I think it's good to have some variety in the coaching staff as well, with different, and you find the consensus, and that's the best way forward. Did have one more note and it was kind of a milquetoast press conference, but just one more note, which will probably segue pretty nicely into our next segment. They asked Minter directly about the coaching hires. He would not confirm nor deny. He did say the OC and DC searches are far along, and he expects to be able to announce them in the near future. So I know some people are nervous. Anyway, we'll get to it, but that was a note.
I just one thing that I would point to in that specifically is that it almost does rule out Clint Kubiak if you're talking about for OC, if the process is far along and they're gonna talk about it in the next week or 10 days, because that amount of time there won't even be time to get Kubiak.
I don't see Kubiak leaving for a lateral move out coming off a Super Bowl.
It's Lamar Jackson,
versus
Sam Bradford.
They can block it, right? Unless they can add on some kind of title, assistant GM.
That would be the trick. Assistant head coach.
Seattle,
I hope he wouldn't be assistant GM.
Yeah, go for it. But then Seattle could match that too. They say, "Oh, you're our assistant head coach too." I don't know. I kind of feel like the Kubiak ship has sailed, but I still think there's a couple other good candidates.
All right, let's talk about some of the other guys they got at positional groups. Then we'll come back to the OC and DC if that's okay.
Absolutely.
So, very, very excited about the Mike Mickens hire and the Dwayne Ledford hire. So Mickens is going to be the defensive backs coach. He comes from Notre Dame. I did a whole pod on this with Femi. That was good. But he's coached a bunch of guys who've been drafted the top 3 rounds in 6 years at Notre Dame, including Benjamin Morrison, Xavier Watts, Kyle Hamilton, and now Leonard Moore, who looks like he'll go in round 1 in 2027. So the best defensive backfield in the entire nation in 2025, a 69.5 passer rating against them, 14 touchdowns allowed, 21 interceptions. That's right, 14 and 21, not 21 and 14, which would be more normal maybe. And they were 5th by PFF grade. There's some small schools and some non-power fives that were ahead of them, but this was the secondary in the country. And the Notre Dame fans are despondent over the loss,
Right.
which I absolutely love.
Yes. It seems like a home run hire there. I was hoping, I mentioned it last time, that Minter would be able to tap in his college connections to maybe get outside the Harbaugh tree a little bit, so there's not so much competition for the same coaching pool. And he was able to do that here. This is a guy Mickens, that can probably develop into a defensive coordinator down the road, underneath of Minter, and then maybe move on to even greater heights. And I mean, this seems like a home run hire to me. And I did think it's interesting that he is the passing defense coordinator, and Ledford is the rushing offensive coordinator. So you would assume that there's going to be their other counterparts to be hired. And that seems to be the new model across the NFL in a lot of ways now, where you have your coordinator, and then under your coordinator, there's passing coordinator and rushing coordinator on either side of the ball.
Yeah, that's true. And there's a pass rush coordinator, or pass rush coach for the
Yeah.
Ravens now. So I don't know. In all of this, I've heard nothing about the status of him, by the way.
Chuck. Yeah.
Chuck Smith, yeah. And I'm a little surprised that we haven't so far, but it's interesting. Anyway, the fact that the Notre Dame fans are very upset about Mike Mickens leaving is a big deal. And you're right. I mean, they worked together at Cincinnati and Indiana State, right? Both of those places they seem to have together. Or
he was played underneath of him. Mickens played underneath of Minter at the first stop, and then they worked together, I think.
Okay.
But
all right, that makes sense.
Moving on to Ledford, because I had a couple questions I wanted to ask you, being our offensive line guru. This is a guy that was earmarked a month ago as maybe an ascending offensive line guru that was hitting the market and available, and I didn't know if they'd be able to land him. It's great to have him. He can be your offensive line legacy coach, dynasty coach. Do you think his scheme tips the hand as far as which way they're leaning as far as coordinator?
That's a tough question, because I think it's there. They could be agnostic to it, because Ledford has been both an excellent pass blocking and run blocking coach. So, so there's that. But his success most recently with the Falcons is remarkable in terms of the success rate of Bijan Robinson. In 2024, Bijan Robinson had a 60.2% success rate, which is the highest ever for a running back in 300 plus carries. And this is in a year where Barkley and Henry are taking all the headlines,
right?
And both of them rushed for about 600 more yards than Bijan did, or maybe 500 each. But the fact of the matter was, Bijan had a fantastic success rate, and that's kind of what Ledford's offenses have been known by, is good success rate, high percentage of carries that go for 5+ yards. That is an unbelievably potentially nuclear combination with Lamar Jackson. Nuclear in a positive way, I'm saying, is that you've got the biggest success raiser of running backs in terms of success rate in NFL history at quarterback, and then you've got you hire an offensive line coach who really understands that. I'm so positive about this. I have a lot more to say about Dwayne Ledford, but extremely positive about this hire. I did want to hear from you. Do you think that is it surprising at all to you that they go out and they get Ledford before they get their offensive coordinator, who should have had some say in that?
Someone asked me this on Twitter, actually, last night or the night before. I don't necessarily, because offensive line is almost like its own department within the offense. If you were hiring a wide receivers coach or the quarterback coach before the coordinator, that would not make too much sense to me. But we've seen it before. A lot of times offensive line coaches, the good ones, outlast several coordinators. So to me, that didn't make. And you have to strike while the iron's hot. I mean, this is a guy that has earned top marks throughout. I had another question for you on Ledford, and as far as how he impacts the likelihood of resigning Linderbaum. Now, there's two schools of thought. One is Linderbaum's pretty much a perfect scheme fit for the outside zone, wide zone that Ledford has run recently. So one school of thought is make a strength even stronger. You have a great coach, get him the best personnel that fit it perfectly. The other school of thought is you have a great coach, you can go a little bit cheaper at
Mhm.
certain places, so then you can have more balance elsewhere on your roster. And Ledford got away with, I believe, a former UDFA at center last year for the Falcons.
Okay, so I don't think Ledford's spot here, it will be the biggest determinant in whether or not they sign Linderbaum. I think it'll come down to two things primarily. One is what Linderbaum's price is, and number two is does Lamar Jackson make it a condition of him getting the extension? And will the extension get done? Because the extension has to get really done before Linderbaum is signed, not for money purposes. I'm being very clear about this. The Ravens can make it work from a money purpose either way. But what they would really be dumb to do is sign Linderbaum and then not have Jackson for, say, 3 of Linderbaum's 5 years here or
Mhm.
2 of 4 years here. Either one
Mhm.
would be a complete disaster. In fact, it really, if I hate to say this, and I'm not indicating that this is something I want to see happen, but if they can't sign Lamar Jackson this offseason, they might have to trade him before next year.
Mm.
So they'll be stuck in a position where it might be sign him and or they just have to let him go, and it's a
Mm.
nightmare. You don't want to face that, but you have to get what you can out of the player. I know you posted something earlier today, and I wanted to let you react to the Jackson thing, but about the Ravens' biggest mistakes in history, and one of them was Anquan Bolden being traded for a 6th-round pick. That's the way people choose to remember that. That's not how Anquan Bolden left the Ravens. Anquan Bolden was cut because they couldn't afford to keep him and also sign Joe Flacco. So they
Uh, well, they signed no. They only saved $2 million for Bolden, and they ended up signing Chris Canty, Marcus Spears, who was at safety, Kendrick Lewis. They spent that money on
Elvis
run
Dumervil.
defenders.
Yeah.
Well, Elmas Duro was the one, but he was at way after, right? Because that was like the last day of free agency where they had the fax machine snafu. They were going to do the Bolden trade before they even knew Dumerville was available. And I understand you get the most you can for salvage value, but they shouldn't have viewed him as a salvage value player after 10 and a half yards per target and all the great things he did
Oh,
in
he
that
didn't have 10 and a
postseason
half
run.
yards per target.
Yeah, in the postseason. In
Oh,
the
in the
postseason
postseason.
that year.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
the most important time. Yeah.
well, it's also the most limited time. There have been a lot of receivers who had 10 and a half yards in a postseason. Let's put it that way, even against the good
He
competition.
was he was incredible that postseason. He could have been Super Bowl MVP.
I loved him too, but and I really want to say it. And he had 3 years that were pretty decent after that. So it's not like there wasn't some value still left in him. But if you're comparing him to the players they didn't draft, drafting Patrick Queen over Xavier McKinney, I mean, there's no comparison in those two moves and how bad they were for the organization.
I'm with you there. I was
Okay.
adamantly opposed to the Queen. Anyway,
Why
let's
was he
get
in
back
your
on
top
track.
3? What's this?
Because I thought that a draft, I think that it was probably more of a philosophy that mistake where they said, we're going to just try to become ground and pound and only, we only need to have one difference maker wide receiver at a time. When I think the Flacco second half of Flacco era could have been a lot different if they invested more at receiver at the expense of some other things, because they had just won the Super Bowl by throwing the ball all over the field. But anyway, that's probably a topic for a different podcast in the dog days of the off season.
All right. So a couple more things about Ledford. Let me just give you a little bit of background on this. And by the way, this is out there on a pod I did with Femi. It's out there on a 1-minute short where I went through this, machine gun quick here. But he was at Appalachian State, not when they beat Michigan. That was in 2007, but when they transferred from the FCS to the FBS. As a very difficult transition. They moved to the Sun Belt. And the very first year they were in the Sun Belt, Ledford's offensive line was ranked in the top 10 nationally in adjusted sack rate and in the top 40 of percentage of carries of 5+ yards. First year coming up from
That's
FCS
outstanding.
to FBS. This thing unbelievable. Yeah. NC State, he dramatically improved their pass blocking. And it's a whole bunch of information is out there. I went into it in greater detail with Femi. And he had more success at Louisville. The Louisville program was completely bankrupt after Lamar Jackson left. So they had a 2-10 year the next year. And then Ledford came in along with Satterfield, and they went 8-5 the year after that. So they turned that program around like that together. And he went with them on his next job. No, he went with them to Louisville from NC State. That's what it was. Okay. And then he went to the Falcons, and he's had very good success there with the run game.
Yeah, his resume is impeccable. He's also going to bring along with him the assistant offensive line coach, Flaherty, which I think his father's a head O line coach with maybe the 49ers or somebody out west. So, just overall, it's fantastic to see Minter willing to just chase the best BCA, best coaches available. They don't have to necessarily have a tie to him. They don't necessarily have to be, anything more than we want the best coaches. I mean, I don't see how you could want to devise a program any better way than that. I've seen some, not that I want to bring it about Harbaugh, but I've seen some quotes out of New York saying that Harbaugh doesn't need a cast of all. I think they said all-star coaches. He's the all-star, and I'm thinking he's the CEO. He needs the all-stars.
I mean, I don't think this is even remotely mappable to Harbaugh's career. Harbaugh has a big tree. Tomlin is the guy who doesn't really have a tree of coaches that have gone on to make success elsewhere.
They're ticked off because they wanted to keep the O-line coach that they had, and Harbaugh got rid of him. And apparently he was pretty good. But anyway, shall we move on to the players, the coaches that are confirmed to be retained?
Yeah, absolutely. Who would you like to go first?
Well, first I'll say they're maintaining the strength and conditioning department, which I think is I'll start there. Yeah, I think the players voted or they wanted to keep them. Their marks as far as the NFLPA grading have improved. And as we mentioned last week, you're just 150, 200 different jobs in the castle. The more that are performing above their, at their grade or above, there's the guys you want to keep. So I thought that was a very positive development.
Yeah, I agree. I'm actually a little surprised that they're not on Harbaugh's list to take with him, because Harbaugh submitted this huge list of names supposedly that are people he wanted to take with him, and the Ravens could block some of them. But anyway, I am a little surprised those guys stayed, or it appears so. The guy I'd move on to, and I say is an absolutely enormous keep, is Randy Brown. Very sneaky announcement today. He's 58 years old, so it's not like he's got forever still to coach, but he's been 18 years with the Ravens. He's actually a South Jersey guy. I wasn't sure whether he's a Central Jersey, North Jersey, whatever, but Evesham, I'm not sure how you say it, Township was where he was the mayor, and that's a Philadelphia suburb. But it really felt like he'd probably go back to New Jersey with Harbaugh. I'm actually kind of shocked that it didn't work out that way. But Jordan Stout's coming off an AP1 season. Jordan Stout's one of the best holders in the league. Loop had a good rookie year as a kicker. And when I say that, 0.0 on the field goals and extra points, expected points DVOA metric. Now, he had a tough time with kickoffs this year.
Right.
And so I'm hoping that improved. But I think you'll agree that, when you're 0 as a rookie, you're probably arrows are pointed up. Arrows are green in terms of improvement.
I'd like to bring in some competition for Loop, but I don't think he's out of the team's plans. I think you want to put him in a pressurized situation in training camp where he's kicking head-to-head against somebody and see how he fares, and make sure that he's not scarred from the miss against Pittsburgh. But yeah, I think Brown's a great. And I don't know. There's no word that he's necessarily going to be the coordinator. He may be the just remain the kicking guru under Levine potentially, or somebody else that Minter likes.
Yeah, I don't believe that's true either. And my bet would be that Levine would be the guy, or they'd at least split the duties in some way, that Levine is coverage coordinator or return and coverage coordinator or something that would specify the duties. But I don't think a lot of that matters, because I think Randy Brown had an assistant head coach tag on him for a long time. I'm sure in terms of monetarily, he's being taken care of. So he's a guy I'm very excited about that particular retention. I think it's extremely important.
Absolutely agree. That good sign. One more that we should mention is Rick Santucci, the inside backers coach who joined the team last year, was previously a defensive coordinator at the collegiate level. So that was another one where they, paid a guy that probably was a little bit overqualified, that didn't want to deal with the NIL and transfer mess. Did a nice job. I mean, he earned Teddy Buchanan a all-rookie team bid. And I thought Trenton Simpson, when given an opportunity, fared pretty well. So I'm definitely happy that they're keeping Santucci around.
Okay, I think that's Tyler Santucci. If we're,
I'm sorry. Did I say
You
Trevor?
you said Rick Santucci, but it's
Okay, my
Tyler.
fault.
No big deal. But I agree. I think it's a good keep. One of the things I'm encouraged about was Santucci's in terms of how he impacted. I thought Trenton Simpson played better this last year, and I thought Buchanan's rookie year is so far ahead of where Queen was at the same point, even with the huge disparity in draft round as well being a consideration. That I think you look at his performance as being quite good.
Yes. I believe those are all of the guaranteed retentions that we've heard. We also had some departures that we should probably touch on briefly.
Warhop.
Let's start with Warhop's new boss, Todd Monken, Cleveland Browns head coach, and I think he's probably one of the best options they had, considering all the trouble they had getting people to even consider their job.
How funny is it that they want to do the thing they are? I mean, okay. I just got to say this. There's a long story for a short payoff, for a small payoff, but I'll say this: at Transamerica, I was at a significant role in terms of how we would bring an intern.
Let me tell you about the online cannabis company that's changing the game, Mood.com. They created an entirely line of functional gummies, 100% federally legal THC blends, discreetly delivered right to your doorstep. And here's the best part. You can get 20% off your first order at Mood.com with the promo code Ravens. Now, I've tried a bunch of their gummies myself. Each one's totally unique. The Sleepy Time gummies knock me out right away. They help me unwind fast, leave me refreshed the next morning. The Epic Euphoria gummies, they're perfect for when your day just isn't going the way you want it to go. What makes Mood special is how they pair the THC with natural herbs and adaptogens. You won't find blends like this at any local shop. They've got gummies designed for focus, relaxation, clarity, even energy, all made from cannabis grown on small, family-owned American farms. No pesticides, no shortcuts, just high-quality weed you can trust. Plus, Mood backs everything with a 100-day satisfaction guarantee. So head on over to Mood.com, check out their amazing selection, and don't forget to use the promo code Ravens at checkout to save 20% off your first order. This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. The new year doesn't have to mean a whole new you. Sometimes it's just about feeling a little less burdened. And one thing, for instance, I'm working on is letting go of that constant pressure to have everything figured out. Like I need to be perfect or I am behind if I'm not. Therapy can help you identify what's weighing you down or holding you back by giving you an unbiased perspective so you can better understand your relationships, your motivations, and your emotions. And BetterHelp makes it easy to get matched online with a qualified therapist. Their therapists are fully licensed in the U.S. and work according to a strict code of conduct. They also do initial matching work for you so you can focus on your goals. You'll fill out a short questionnaire. With their experience and strong matching process, they typically get it right the first time. And if you're not happy with your match, you can switch to a different therapist at any time from tailored recommendations. BetterHelp makes it easy to get matched online with qualified therapists. Sign up and get 10% at BetterHelp.com. That's BetterHelp.com.
Hi, folks. The Super Bowl is here, and MyBookie is where you can turn your bets into bankroll. Are you scheduled to go to the Super Bowl party and you don't want to be there? Yeah, I've been to that party too. Managing your portfolio of wagers through the evening can be your ticket through Super Sunday without getting caught up in your brother-in-law's political rhetoric. Whatever your take on the game, MyBookie has both side and prop bets to make your Super Sunday a lot of fun. That's why I use MyBookie. You've probably heard them talked about on Jimmy Kimmel Live for their deep board of prop bets. These bets become some long-lasting memories, including watching Refrigerator Perry score in Super Bowl 20 at 100-1 odds. If there's ever a time to get in, it's right now. One account, one wallet, bet the spread, live bet the second half, hit the casino during commercials. It all lives in one place. Go to mybookie.ag now, use promo code Ravens, and get your first bet covered up to $500. If it doesn't hit, use your bet back bonus token and run it back. Don't just watch the big game, make it pay on MyBookie. Every day, companies you've never heard of are making millions off your personal data. Your name, address, phone number, even details about your family are pulled from public records on the internet, then sold without your consent. There's an entire marketplace built on your privacy, and most people have no idea it exists. Aura fights back. Aura removes your personal data from broker sites and keeps it off. Aura also alerts you fast if your information shows up in a breach or on the dark web. But Aura is more than just a data broker removal system. It's a full digital security suite that protects every part of your online life. Aura gives you a VPN to stay private, antivirus to block threats, a password manager for safer logins, and spam call protection to shut down scammers. Aura scans the dark web for your most sensitive information and notifies you instantly if anything is exposed. And if your identity is ever stolen, you're backed by up to $5 billion in insurance and 24/7 US-based fraud support. Other service charges about the same, but only cover one or two areas. Aura gives you everything: data broker removal, identity and credit monitoring, device protection, and fraud support, all in one simple app. Aura removes what's already exposed, protects what's not, and puts you back in control. Go to aura.com/remove for complete digital protection and peace of mind. That's aura.com/remove. And new hires. And in actuarial work, actuaries rotate through responsibilities very typically, so they get to try a lot of different jobs, or at least at big companies, that's often the way it works. And when you do that, you have to have people that everybody in the group agrees. I'm talking to one particular person out there. Everybody in the group agrees meet the minimum standard that you want to have in any place that they might move to. So it's not your hire, it's our hire is the way you need to think of it. So I forgot where I was going with this darn thing. Oh yeah, we're talking about
Todd Monken.
We're talking about Todd Monken somehow. How did this come up with this? But anyway, I have completely lost my train of thought.
I'll give you a moment to think. Then I'll fill some dead air. So Monken was previously the Browns' defense coordinator in, I believe, 19, and they fired him. And now they hired him as their head coach. I think Monken can do a good job. He's a straight shooter. I personally like the way Monken carries himself, but it does add some risk that now you have two new head coaches that are trying to take away your staff members. I don't know how many the Ravens want to take. One of the ones I wasn't too concerned with them taking is George Warhop, who Giants fans would have rioted if Harbaugh took him up there, from what I saw on their message board. But apparently Monken just said George is the best OC for our position, or the one that will agree to it. So he is officially gone, obviously.
Yes. And I think we knew this already. I think the hiring of the assistant means that Travell Wharton is also gone. I don't know it for sure. Warhop did some positive things as a coach. They should be remembered. He cut down on penalties during the second half of 24 in particular. I thought Daniel Faalele, for the last 5 games anyway, played quite well. And that was a shame that none of that was carried through into 25, that he wasn't as, nearly the player he was at the end of 24. So, there's some pluses, there's some minuses. I don't think it's fair to say the entire line regressed in 25, but the line's aggregate performance certainly regressed in 25. And that was unfortunate.
Yeah, I think Rosengarten is taking a little bit too much criticism. I thought he had a good year, sophomore year. There are other 4, Voorhees you didn't know because that was really his first opportunity. The other 3, I think, regressed slightly. But he's never, at least last time I looked at his Wikipedia page, Warhop had never been a long-time offensive line coach anywhere, and that's a little bit of a red flag because, as you said, when you get a really good one, you want to keep him for a decade or more. Right. So let's see here. Chris Horton, special teams coordinator to the Giants. The Ravens originally blocked him. Then they said, well, you can go there if you want. So apparently he did.
Yeah, it's a loss. And it does speak to the possibility that additional responsibilities for Randy Brown might be part of this. So, or for Anthony Levine, could be either, because Levine, to the best of my knowledge, has not left yet. And so he
took an interview in Tampa, but he didn't. That's what I heard was Levine took an interview in Tampa, but that was the extent of it.
Okay. Well, certainly if he's being interviewed for special teams coordinator there, he can do that without any question. So they wouldn't have even need to get permission to do so.
And this one's probably more from the unfortunate variety. Greg Lewis, wide receivers coach, last show with Tennessee yesterday. And I was a little bit disappointed by that. I thought he did a nice job developing Tez Walker in particular. I thought he did a nice job with Zay Flowers. Zay still has a few finer points as far as yards after the catch, running after the catch to work out, but he certainly is two-time Pro Bowler now, first drafted receiver that they've ever had to become a Pro Bowler. I think they might be a little bit hard-pressed to find an upgrade on Greg Lewis. He came from Kansas City with a very high pedigree and did well here. But, this is what happens when you change coaches. You don't get to keep everybody you want necessarily.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a, if I'm worried about it, my scale of worry, it's a 6 or a 7 worry. It's not a 10. So you ideally that wouldn't happen. You at least have the choice to do it or not. But they did a good job. What's nice is they did a good job jumping the gun. I think when they had to jump the gun to get a couple of guys, and I think we're going to be progressively probably less excited by the additional hires that come down the pike. And maybe are we ready to talk OC and DC now?
Just want to make mention of Zach Gore. He's apparently in line or highly strongly considering becoming the Cowboys linebacker coach. So that would be a demotion for him. A little bit interesting that Harbaugh opted after passing over Denard Wilson for Orr first time, went with Denard Wilson the second time. I hope the best for Zach. I think it was a little bit early for him. He's from Texas, so that might be a good place for him to land on his feet and hopefully rise back up. And if he can join the Ravens coaching staff in a positional role in the future, I wouldn't be opposed to that.
All right. Let's move on, talk offensive coordinator and defensive coordinator then. And maybe we talk about the defensive side first. I think it's in some ways the more interesting side for finding a coordinator because it's not exactly clear how they would go about it. What's the ideal skill set and background that they want? They've got now 2 extremely strong defensive backs and secondaries coaches to go with an overall good X's and O's guy in terms of Minter. At least we expect him to be that. Do they need a defensive line guy? Do they need a front 7 guy to integrate with that at the DC spot?
That would be my preference. I think, you want to marry the back to the front. You're strong in the back now, so let's get strong in the front. I also think somebody with a little bit more experience would probably be good here. You're not looking for an X's and O's wizard. You already have that with Minter. So you're looking for somebody that, maybe knows the way to run a team and some of the nuance that goes there. This is kind of I saw some people throwing this out there. Jim Schwartz. Any interest in Schwartz? Because apparently he's ticked off. He doesn't want to go back to Cleveland.
Yeah, that's interesting. So he would be the DC and a non-play calling DC. I really question whether he'd want to do that.
Right.
I wouldn't have a problem with it, but I think you've got an opportunity here that you better not pass on when the time's right. And that is to get a great leader of men in the position who also happens to know the front 7, who could potentially give you Rooney Rule picks in the future. And that guy, the obvious candidate for me is Anthony Weaver to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think Weaver makes a lot of sense in that position. His strength is being, as you mentioned, leader of men, culture setter. He's not necessarily the X's and O's wizard, so he would complement Jesse Minter very nicely. So I'd be on board with that. I'm not sure. I guess he got passed over in Pittsburgh. He's got passed over with the Giants. He got passed over in Baltimore. So he's probably looking for something. It might be a hand in glove kind of fit.
Yeah, I think my guess is he would be eager to take the job at this point if he was offered it. The success of the defense in Miami wasn't over the top by any stretch. I'm doing a little project right now looking at how Jesse Minter used Odafe Owe and got more out of him on last year because that really interests me. But the other thing they could do is bring in a true pass rush guru, not necessarily a guy who's going to teach individual moves. I want that guy too, but a scheme guy who can make use of the fact that Kyle Hamilton is around. I think one of the things that really helped Owe was the presence of Derwin James. Sure. And you normally, it's inside out blocking scheme and whatnot, and Travis Jones should make everybody better, but Derwin James has that effect too. And Kyle Hamilton and Owe's time didn't intersect it might have intersected for a game, but I don't even think it was even one game because Owe played 5 games here. And I think that next week against the Rams was the first week that Kyle Hamilton went to slot corner.
Well, because they needed Gilman on the back end. Yeah, those two things are tied.
They would have.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so another candidate that has apparently been requested, I think he has been interviewed, is Joe Cullen, former Ravens defensive line coach. He was well regarded when he was here. He's been in Kansas City for a couple years, done a pretty good job. Obviously, Chris Jones is already established, done a pretty good job developing Karlaftis, I would say. I think he probably fits the mold of a guy that can help you navigate the challenges of being an NFL head coach and without necessarily needing to call the plays or wanting to call the plays.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think that, it'd be a guy, hopefully, who could work out what was on the front seven. I think he's been a very good defensive line coach, fairly highly thought of, and it would make a lot of sense from that perspective. You need two things. You want complementary skill sets in terms of who they coach well by player, and you want also people who can work collaboratively on the integrated game plan for those. So I want both of those things. I don't know where Cullen is as a potential future play caller. It could well be something that the person who takes this role isn't shutting themselves out of future play calling experience. So maybe there's a guy even a lower down, a younger guy, worked with defensive linemen already, but is working up to be a coordinator someday. Somebody who's like basically where Zach Orr was a couple of years ago, except he gets to be defensive coordinator here in Baltimore with non-play calling responsibility.
Yes.
Might be kind of an ideal fit for the team.
Yeah, I mean, with Minter at the head of the spear, tip of the spear on defense, I'm not too concerned that they're going to not hire the right guy for defense coordinator.
All right.
I did forget to mention they do need a defensive line coach now because Harbaugh took Dennis Johnson to the Giants, and he really resurrected his career. He wasn't even, if I recall correctly, Johnson was not I think he was an assistant D-line coach before Harbaugh brought him to the NFL, and now he's had a D-line coach at two different spots. So that's good on John to continue that, fostering that. But yes, I think D-line coach. I always look back to Clarence Brooks, one of the guys that really helped mold the Ravens into who they were for years and years. Almost like the staple, not quite the same as an O-line coach, but a good D-line coach like that. And apparently the Steelers D-line coach, and I forget his name, but he's been around a long time. You'll recognize him if you see him. Black guy with kind of has those like white marks on his face. I don't know what that's called.
Oh, I know you mean. Yeah.
Alopecia or something. Yeah, he's has not been retained by McCarthy, so maybe he's somebody you look at if you're not married to a certain
Carl
trade.
Dunbar.
Okay.
Yeah. I know the condition you're talking about. I know that I've seen that guy on the sidelines. I'm looking at Carl Dunbar's picture though. He doesn't look like that. At least it doesn't look. Anyway, neither here nor there. But if I'm open to whatever they find, and I think this is something where Minter is going to seek this skill set. I don't think it's a question of that he doesn't want the other guy. That would be really interesting. And boy, you talk about three guys who are going to be just chewing it up over a game plan. Is Clinkscale, the guy from who eventually got passed over for defensive coordinator in San Diego. They went down to the college ranks and got
O'Leary. O'Leary was Minter's right-hand man for a long time, so they're staying in that vein.
But Clinkscale had been also, in fact, he'd been his co-defensive coordinator at Michigan for 2 years, and this could be another guy. And obviously worked with him with the Chargers as well. This would have been a fairly natural fit, I think. I'm not sure if he'd be that excited about working for Jesse again after them being on the same level. But it seems like a natural fit. Tremendous experience there. But then you have three defensive backs coaches effectively.
Right. So the other name we should mention here is Jimmy Leonard, who was obviously the Ravens remember him as a safety and a punt returner for a while there. One of the fan favorites of what was that, about 2014, 2015, 16, in that 2008. Range? 2008. Wow. I was way off there.
Yeah, the years have
way
passed.
Off there.
The interesting point about Jim Leonard, between 1997 and 2012, every game he was healthy, Ray Lewis had the green dot. As far as I know, every game he was healthy, he had the green dot. With the exception of three, and the three playoff games in 2008, Jim Leonard wore the green dot.
Huh. Interesting.
Incredible change to be made at that point.
So he's been known as a defensive mind. He's been in the college coaching ranks for a while. I believe he was Wisconsin's defensive coordinator for a while. I know they were hot heavy on him up in New York, up in the Meadowlands. He did not, end up with that job. And I know other teams are interested in him. He might be overqualified to be a non-defense, non-play caller DC, but apparently the Ravens are reaching out to him, so we should at least touch on it.
Yeah. I think it's a reasonable choice. That the same reasons come back. That this is a guy who probably understands defensive backs more, but since he's had already coordinator experience at the college level at a big Power 5 program, I mean, I think that's a reasonable solution as well. If he's, he's obviously, the good news is he knows he's not going to be calling defensive plays. So he's after the Minter hire. The Ravens have told him, no doubt, that Minter's calling the plays, and he still wants to interview. Good. Good sign.
Just something to note, and I don't want to be cynical about this at all or come off the wrong way, but there is an advantage to hiring a African-American coordinator. Absolutely. Because you have the 2 picks. And I'm not saying that to be, shady or malicious in any way.
It's not shady at all. It's what the rule is intended to do. It's supposed to create more opportunity for African-Americans at exactly that level. And
a lot of the African-American friends that are in my Ravens group chats are saying they should hire both. And I was like, yeah, let's do it. I don't know if you noticed this, Ken, not to go too far aside, but why are there so many Irish head coaches these days? About 30% of the league has an Irish surname nowadays.
I just don't think of life that way, so I don't really get to it. But it's absolutely. I mean, the Rooney Rule is intended exactly at the coordinator level to provide more opportunity for African American head coaches. In fact, it almost has a counter version at the next level, because one of the things you might not want to do is hire an African American coordinator from a team in your own division as your head coach, because then you give them 2-3 round draft picks, and why don't you just give me 2 stabs in the gut while you're at it, kind of thing. But I think because all but 3 of the other teams in the NFL would take you, it's still a good net opportunity boost for that. But that's exactly what the rule's supposed to do. I don't think there's anything wrong. Right.
Yeah, no, it's supposed to incentivize them, and it should be. Where's that pipeline? Where's the Brian Flores pipeline? Apparently, one of Flores' assistants, I think, did get a DC job somewhere else, who's also a black guy. So that's good to see. We want to see diversity for sure. Shall we transition to the offensive side?
Absolutely.
Okay, so there's a little bit of ambiguity here. Let's first off the top, Mike McDaniel and Joe Brady are off the board, and they might have been the top 2 choices. So that's a little bit disappointing. That's a risky take sometimes when you hire a defensive side of the ball guy. And it's going to be I'm not DEFCON 5 worried, and I don't worry too often, but I'm a little bit worried. I do still think they have some pretty good options, beginning with a new name to surface, Declan Doyle, who is out of Chicago, who I will also say it looks like most of the offense coordinator options remaining are more spread-based play callers, and they don't use a fullback, which might be good or bad depending on how you want to see the Ravens go into the future. But let's first go with Declan Doyle.
So obviously worked with Caleb Williams. He'd be a solid choice in terms of the possibles. I really don't know that much about him, but the Bears put together a really great run to get into the playoffs this year. And a lot of it was based on their ability to come back in football games on offense, very much unlike, Bears teams of the past. So I think at least from that standpoint, you have an offensive coordinator who probably gets it. He probably would not be my number 1 choice of the remaining. It definitely would not be of the remaining candidates. I question whether there's a possibility they could still get Clint Kubiak. That would be my next one.
Kubiak? Okay. Yeah. I kind of think that ship has sailed. I hope I'm wrong. I wanted him to be a head coach. So if he could get him at OC, I'd be tickled. But Doyle, I think the 2 big knocks, he hasn't called plays, and he doesn't have a tree necessarily. He wasn't under Ben Johnson, and Ben Johnson kind of went outside of his bubble or whatever you want to call it and found him. Now here's a name that is polarizing, but I think he might be the top shot, and it's Kingsbury. Yep. I know he's got some issues as far as what is the next evolution, and his offense can get figured out. And we debunked some of that last week on our episode. And he's worked with similar type quarterbacks as Lamar. He has experience calling plays, number one, and he has a network of assistants. And I really think that when you have 10 teams competing to fill out their coaching staff, plus all these other teams, the Chargers, they fired a coordinator and want to backfill that. It's the carousel is going to be spinning around like a top for the next couple of weeks. So that to me is worth a good bit of value to have the connections to be able to flesh out all the position coaches.
I agree. So you're kind of buying his Rolodex, buying his web, buying his tree. I'm okay with that. It wouldn't be the first thing. I mean, if he were, I didn't think he could handle the job, then I don't think there's any sense in bringing in a guy like Kingsbury. I do think what he's run offensively is similar enough that it would work for the Ravens. And, one of the things I like about Kingsbury is that his teams in 24 and even before then ran a lot more pony backfield than the Ravens have in recent years. So I think that might be a nice thing.
He's spread. I mean, he's just 11 personnel kind of guy, and most of these guys are. And I personally want to see that iteration of the Lamar Jackson offense. I think that might be the next step that unlocks a whole nother level. So I'd be in favor of that. Shieldhouse. Now that seems to be, is he going to stay with the Rams? Is he not? And there's been conflicting reports. He might not even be available. I'll just say this. After Kingsbury, who's probably my number one OC at the moment, as controversial as that may be, I do think tapping into the McVay-Shanahan tree, whether it's Shieldhouse or their run game coordinator, I think there's a couple other guys out there underneath McVay. Another big benefit of that is, again, those trees have an abundance of branches. So as far as filling position coaches, developing that pipeline, when the top guy moves on, you have the next guy ready to step in to the void. That's appealing to me.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. I'm not as down on the possibility of having a guy who's never called plays before, and he has called plays before, by the way, in college at Iowa State, right?
Yeah, so that's the interesting part. So I first heard he called plays because he was offense coordinator.
Right.
Then I looked up Matt Campbell. Matt Campbell's been a play caller his whole life. He never gave up play call duties until 2023, I think it was, when Shieldhouse got to call some plays, and that was the first time he did it. So that's where I think I've been giving mixed reports there, but that's at least
a very good
the bottom
sign
of that. Yeah, for sure. That you're going to get it up the first time. Yeah.
I mean, I'd certainly, I'd be excited to get him. I think having a good young coach in the position is good. I do think you probably end up losing him in a relatively short period of time, but I'm not as bothered by that as other people were. I'd probably give him an AHC designation right away. So the only role anybody can hire him for is head coach. And then all of a sudden you're back in pick land.
Yep. All right. Let's move on. Well, I guess we'll hit Montgomery, who was the Lions. He's been a wide receiver / ACH. He's been running back / ACH. He's a little bit older. I think some of these guys are young. Doyle is the same age as Lamar. They're both 29 years old, which is kind of crazy to think about. Montgomery to me is maybe a courtesy hire or a Rooney Rule interview. But worth mentioning at least.
Yeah. I don't know anything about his background in terms of where he's called plays in the background. In his background.
Maryland. He was University of Maryland's offense coordinator. And then he got fired after 2 years. So that'd be quite the jump to get fired at Maryland, and now you're OC with the Ravens with the regime.
All right. Yeah. Again, he's coming in. Are there rules for coordinator spots as well as head coach that require them?
That's what I heard.
Demographically diverse.
It might only be one, not two, but I heard that there is some type of which seems difficult, maybe, but that was part of the problem with the Browns is nobody wanted to go there, so they couldn't hire anybody. But
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's where I was going with that. That's where I was going.
Oh,
with
yeah.
that. I said, I mean, now here's coming back to this thing from
There we
Transamerica.
go.
When you have a good job to offer that everybody wants, that a lot of people wants, that's when you could go to this extreme testing thing. We'd put these kids through the first day intern test was something we used, and we'd have them solve problems in front of us and sweat it out and whatnot. There's some people just, clammed up under those conditions. And we respectfully had to decline, but,
Sure.
but that's where I was going. The Cleveland Browns don't have that kind of job to offer. They have a crap job to offer.
Exactly. Well, they have a Pro Bowl quarterback now.
That's
What
good.
a farce that is.
I
What
wonder.
a farce.
I wonder if that will come up. It's the kind of thing. It's such a backhanded slap. You couldn't bring it up in the introductory press conference for that thing. I'm excited to take over an offense that has a Pro Bowl quarterback and an offensive lineman full of Pro Bowlers from 2017 to 19, and
Yeah. All right. Back to OC. One more name we should touch on: Davis Webb. He's Broncos. He's now available. Apparently, the Ravens have requested a formal OC interview. I'm ambivalent to him, to be honest. Ken, where do you stand?
I'd be for it if he's the guy they think has the best long-term future. I'd be okay with it. I'm okay with him having his first play calling here. I'm okay with if Minter is good with the hire. I'm okay if he's out the door quickly. He's a young guy. He's obviously got a great future in the National Football League. If you're going to do it, you got to make it so he can't be interviewed for anything but a head coaching role.
Yes, for sure. And he's another guy that might not have as extensive of a tree or a network or a pipeline to tap into. Younger guy. All things being equal, I prefer somebody with play calling experience. After we saw, that Zach Orr might have had a little bit of a learning curve there. You want to give a top 3 ranking? Because to me, this is really the big key hire for the rest of the offseason. Minter is going to give them a lot of autonomy on that side of the ball. So you want somebody really qualified and capable.
I'd probably go Shieldhouse, Kingsbury, Davis, or Webb, rather, as my top 3.
Okay, I think I'd go Kingsbury first, Shieldhouse second, Doyle third.
Okay.
Just to because I do think Doyle's been around a little bit, but it'll be interesting to see. I mean, that's probably the pivotal thing. And, you want to hit the ground running. There's no guarantee he gets this hire right. This could be a one and done OC. It's a little bit of a down year for offensive minds. It really is.
Yeah, it could be a one and done, and it could be a one if the Ravens are successful, if Lamar Jackson is healthy and he returns to MVP form, then it could be a one and gone. So
yeah, I saw somebody make the mention that going forward, if you have a defensive-minded head coach like Minter, you're probably going to have a new offense coordinator every 2 years going forward.
Yeah,
because either after 2 years they're going to be fired because they didn't perform, or they're going to get a head coaching job because they did. So it is what it is. But let's keep our fingers crossed and hope one of these the allure of Lamar Jackson and the Steve Bisciotti ownership advantage lands on one of the top guys left.
Okay, we're at 103 right now, so I'm going to have to make an executive cut.
I was going to say the same thing. Let's go to the mailbag.
Well, I do want to talk about the Bill Belichick thing because it's timely right now. So, Bill Belichick, of course, the Hall of Fame voted him out in his first year of eligibility, and I think that's really how it worked. The Hall of Fame has come out with a letter today saying they're going to, effectively are threatening to remove some people who voted against him. For not following the bylaws of the organization. And I've since seen Polian's reason for leading this charge is related to Spygate and Deflategate and a 1-year penance that he thought was fair in this. Let me throw this out there, and I want to hear your opinion on this. I don't think I'm not sure whether it's fair or not. I'll start with that. I do think it's rational that Polian has this viewpoint. There's a lot of things that are like Hitler did some rational things. Putin is doing some rational things. Okay, but so it doesn't mean that what Polian is doing is right or fair or correct or anything like that. But he is saying, look, you have crimes against the game on your record. I'm going to exercise within our little democracy here the right to try and drum up votes against you. And all he had to do was drum up 11 votes against him. You want to change the way the inductions are done? Well, change the way the inductions are done. And so 11 out of 50 can't vote him out. But the fact of the matter is, democracy ruled, and that's what it is. I'm not saying it was the right call at all, but I do look at the steroid era, and there's a whole lot. Barry Bonds is out, Roger Clemens is out, Rafael Palmeiro is out. All those guys may eventually go, and then I look at the Rose and Joe Jackson, and I say they'll never go.
Yeah, that's the same point I was going to make. And honestly, I don't have a whole lot of appetite for this topic, but outside shoveling a foot of ice on several days this week, I tuned into a couple podcasts that I don't usually tune into, and they were making the same point about Pete Rose and the steroid era. I just don't care for Polian. Ever since he made that comment about Lamar, he should be a wide receiver. I personally think Belichick deserved first ballot. Not only what he did with the Patriots, what he did with the Giants. I mean, he made Lawrence Taylor. I don't know if anyone's seen the documentary, The Two Bills, but that was excellent. But at the end of the day, that's not my coach. That's not my team. I don't care too much about it. I do hope that Terrell Suggs gets his ticket punched coming up next week.
What about Marshall Yanda?
Of course, Yanda, but I think Yanda's probably more of a third or fourth ballot just because of the position. Suggs, I mean, he's top 10 all time in sacks. Right. He was the best edge setter of the century.
Oh, by far.
He's got 2 Super Bowl rings. He's got Rookie of the Year, Defensive Rookie of the Year. He's got Defensive Player of the Year. How can you keep this guy out? And apparently that's what some folks said, is because there was maybe some off the field incidents with his girlfriend that got swept under the rug with Suggs. Apparently, I think I heard that the NFL is not supposed to take that into account. Baseball is supposed to take off the field. Football is not. So maybe that's where it is.
Does off the field include Spygate and Deflategate? Because Spygate.
That's a good question. That is on the field. That's a good point. Yeah. So, so we were going to do, some cut/trade candidates, and we're running long here. There's so much good content. We'll hit that in the next couple of weeks. I think I have some good thought exercises to do, but let's hit this mailbag question if we can from Harrison Kunkel. What would be your thoughts on a reunion with Oweh this offseason? Showed more production under Minter. Additionally, what would be your offer for someone like him? Would you expect to even want to make a reunion in Baltimore?
Would I expect him to even want to come to Baltimore? I'm not sure. I think it's quite possible he would say no, but money talks in a lot of ways. And, coming back to Minter instead of to Harbaugh might be nice. Of course, it was DeCosta who traded him away, and DeCosta's still here. So you've got that as a potential issue. But, I want to finish the project I'm working on right now, which is really to diagnose why was he so much more successful? Because I think if I really believe it's a case of Hamilton being at slot corner would have a positive impact on Oweh being able to get home, then I think I'd be at a different spot on this. And then it comes down to, where does he fit in the market?
Right. So I've seen that the latest free agent rankings, and he's top 10. The Chargers are going to get a nice comp pick out of that one, which we might look back on and rue the day. I'd be fine with bringing Oweh back. I was a big supporter of Oweh when he was here. I didn't care for the trade very much. I think that you're washing away the Harbaugh era with now Minter, who you succeeded under. He could thrive in that situation. It depends what the Ravens want to do. I'm not the type that wants to hold grudges. To me, it's water under the bridge. Whatever can be best for the team and help the team the most. If the money makes sense, I'm all for it.
Yeah, same position, and it really. I think that's what it's going to just come down to. If Oweh is okay with it, just where does he fit in the market? By comparison, Oweh is still a relatively young player, very young player, frankly. But the guy who's not a young player is Trey Hendrickson, and I think you're taking a big risk to try and sign him. I think it might be more money than Oweh. So,
agreed.
It's we'll see if it really works out that way. I mean, Oweh finished extremely strong this year, and Hendrickson finished extremely out this year. So,
yeah, I'm not too keen on Hendrickson. I think there are some younger guys. I've mentioned Jalen Phillips several times. I honestly think that 14 might be used on an edge, and if you can keep either Jones or find another vet edge, and that's your top 4 with Tavius and Green, you're in a good spot there. Because the more I look at it, like we were talking about Peter Woods last week, and Dan Jeremiah just put out his top 50, and Woods isn't even in his top 30. So that it's looking less likely that a defensive tackle is going to be the pick there. It kind of looks like maybe corner, outside backer, or wide receiver might be the most likely pick here in late January. We still have a long way to go.
Yeah, well, it's the Ravens will take best player available, and I think we've talked about this before. I've certainly talked about it with other people on other shows. If the Ravens go completely contrary to what you believe the team's need is, it's because they're doing it for exceptional value, and they've proven their ability to do that many times.
As long as they don't do it at a replaceable position. I'll take exceptional value at a premium position, but not at a replaceable position.
Well,
that's my stance.
You're not going to draft a quarterback, a left tackle, or an edge in every single draft. So if you draft a corner in the first round, you can't be upset about it.
No, corner I'd be happy. Just don't draft an inside linebacker or running back and say it's exceptional value.
I'm with you there. Okay. The one that would be interesting is if they draft another safety this year. That would, oh my God, that would set some people off, and it might not be a terrible idea. I mean,
that's what we're going to find out. What was the Harbaugh influence versus the Ozzie Newsome DaCosta brain trust? And from my vantage point, they've always invested in secondary from the very beginning before Harbaugh was anywhere near this team. So I mean, up until last year, 2 years ago, I still thought coverage was more impactful than pass rush. So it wouldn't bother me, to be honest.
All right. Okay, Voss, always great talking football with you. Tell folks where they can find your work online or ask you a question if they want to talk football.
My pleasure as always, Ken. I am on Twitter X at Vasilis Larikos, VASILISLERIKOS. Tap in. Let's talk some ball. It's off season here. I love roster construction.
All right, we'll have a lot of fun doing that, and in a lot of ways, I'm sure some people are ready for more roster construction discussion with the exhausting coach search discussion. But there's been some great stuff, some great developments recently. I think are exciting for the Ravens on that front, and I'm glad we had a chance to talk about them here. Please use hashtag Filmstudy Mailbag in the future if you want to ask a question for this show or any other, or potentially even a 1 to 3 minute video that I do directly on Twitter and Reddit in particular, and YouTube. For Voss Larikos, this is Ken McKusick saying goodbye. We'll talk to you next week on Friday Morning GM.